I did get you on to talk something special. Friday's the 20th anniversary for Geographica.
Yeah.
And I had a chat with Aaron in 2014.
Yeah.
And we talked about the album. And I've got some audio for you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've heard this, but this is Aaron talking about your role and his
Yeah.
time. And this is pretty cool. Have a listen to this.
When we actually attempted to record that particular song, I got my stepmother at the time to lend me, which she did, unfortunately, $10,000 to go up to York Street Studios and attempt to record our first EP, which was just awful because what we learned in the most expensive, embarrassing way was that we actually couldn't play our instruments and I couldn't sing and tune. And so we, so we turned up to the studio expecting to, just be and sound amazing, and the result from that was anything but. When we brought it back home to our friend and partner in rock and roll crime, Tom Larkin, did the most awesome thing that at the time didn't feel awesome, proceeded to tell us that the job that we tried to do was complete and utter shit. And, that was hard to take from all of us. And then he backed that up, told us that we needed to do it again with him at the helm. And because he was and still is who he is, we just did everything we could because as far as we're concerned, we're fans of this band called Shihad. And Tom took us under his wing. I'll tell you something not many people know at all, and that was that he particularly took me under his wing and sat with me for a very long time every night with the backing tracks of what we tried to do and made me a singer by getting me to re-record over and over again 100 million times these songs. And by the end of it, we were a band and I was a singer and we were away. And after Tom recorded Natural Compression at Marmalade Studios in Wellington. And that song was the first song that I think actually got his ear because Tom is a music fan and he understands music, obviously. He spent time and work because he thought that this band had potential.
He was talking about the song Let It Go, but man,
Right.
he had some incredible words for you. And looking back all that time ago, what do you remember about those formative years?
Oh, look, I mean, it's beautiful to hear him talk about that. I mean, he expressed it to me, both privately and publicly many times. So, I felt he really, I think, openly thanked me so many times for that. I got a lot out of Aaron too, and I'm not talking about, the kind of like the what you would kind of look at the context of the a producer who does something, even though that was a thing. But I got so much out of Aaron insofar as seeing someone who was as pure a talent as one might come across in this lifetime. And it's what's difficult to talk about him now and difficult to talk about whether it's that process or anything or what's around people who are that talented is that it seems to be a common fact, and it's one that I've taken very seriously, and I'm trying to do my best to contribute as best I can towards changing this. But people with that level of talent often don't fare very well, particularly in the latter stages of life. And so Aaron was my experience of finding, someone who was at that age and was really like I suppose a brother. And, he gave me so much just being able to work with him through that. And his determination was, equal to or more than my determination to bring that natural talent out. And you could just, when you see it and you go, you've got this, but you haven't put in the time to get it out. Or maybe someone hasn't told you you've got it. Or maybe you never thought that you had it yourself, and I'm talking specifically about his singing. And, I see that all the time. People can't, people don't have that awareness, particularly when they're younger, of what perhaps they could be. And, Aaron had so much of it that it was so obvious that it was such an easy investment of time and energy to see that actually take off and fly, you know. And I think that what Weta accomplished, but then what Aaron went on to accomplish as well, gave me so much to know that time spent created something so beautiful. Do you know what I mean? That and he shared that with other people, and it was not easy. It was brutal in terms of the work, and it's hard to take someone who's being direct and honest, but where the agenda is for your eventual benefit. And he was brave enough and courageous enough to take that on and see it and see that kind of feedback for what the intention was, not to react to it as criticism. The other thing I would say is that what made that recording not so good was not actually the recording. In fact, the recording, tone-wise, sounded fantastic, actually. You know, it was actually a really well-recorded piece of work. It was really well done. The problem was not that, it was actually the performance. It was like, you know, the vocals weren't up to scratch. It was at that time when you'd spend, you know, $2,000 a day going to a studio. So you had to do everything quickly, and they were just not developed enough to be able to execute at the potential of the songs or the potential of what they could get to. They just haven't put in the time to get to that point. And so that's really what my job was to actually take the time to do that. It was also my first experience of using Pro Tools as a for the great benefit that it can offer, which was this thing where you could actually take it out and record in a small room and use Pro Tools without, you know, spending money on the clock. And that's how we did it. We did all that work in Pro Tools, and it was my first experience of doing it. We were usually on tape. So we're talking a long time ago. We're talking like, what, 96? So 97, something like, maybe it was 98. Sorry, whenever Natural Compression was out. But it was 90s, you know, so Pro Tools was new, and it was very useful working with Aaron on that. And we would not have been able to do that without that facility and, you know, his commitment to work. But yeah, look, that being said, the whole band were amazing too. You know, each of them had their own strengths, but Aaron always was that songwriter, that natural talent. I remember meeting him in a music store and seeing him play, and you just knew the way he played guitar, it was a language. It wasn't he's playing the guitar. It was like, no, that's actually an extension of your soul. And that continued forever with him. It only grew. So yeah, my memories of him were being a really funny, warm, sweet, talented guy who just had the thing, you know, had that X factor that, you know, it when you see it. And if you're plugged in, you understand music, you're a music lover. When you see someone like that, you just know it's there.
He was a rock star through and through, but he was also the front man who didn't want to be the front man kind of guy too. That's the vibe that I got from him at times, but then other times he was the performer. His brother Tookie was talking about him running up and down the halls of Warner Records doing Freddie Mercury impersonations, impressing all the people there. Like,
yeah, well,
he loved the attention,
of course. But the thing was that he could fall into that so comprehensively, right? He absolutely could channel that, and he had so much talent. But you see, the problem with someone like Aaron, and it goes back to what I was saying before, is that he would fall into that mode of operation so comprehensively, so deeply, and so totally that it would take a lot out of him. And so he would be, and he didn't have, whether it was, you know, and I think that this is a conversation around, you know, what we do in the music industry and how we support people when we see these kind of things. But there was no structure around saying, hey man, you know, you know, you've stayed up for 5 days without sleeping. We need to get you some sleep, mate. You know what I mean? That was all seen as heroics. You know, and so he would just burn out. But he would have magnificent creative bursts and, you know, make wonderful music in that time and do all these kind of funny things. But then it just cost him dearly. You know, he paid a really high personal price for being able to so comprehensively enter that state.
Yeah, I mean, the guys didn't shy away from talking of what they were saying, that he, you know, at one point he was having a bit of a manic episode, but it was also at the same time that he wrote and finished an opera. And so it's kind of like these two separate energies were changing all the time.
If you can imagine that someone has, you know, he had the same energy, so to speak, as anyone else, right?
Yeah.
and this I suppose is the syndrome that I'm kind of trying to explain that happens with certain creatives. And it's like his energy, it would be so comprehensively directed at creativity and music and encompassing that. And when he did it, it was so total that it would actually appear like magic. I'm not even kidding. It's like what he was able to accomplish at his peaks, I have yet to see anyone do it. Like what he could write and how much of Geographica he wrote in 2 hours, or whilst doing an opera.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not feasible to expect anyone to actually do that, even at the top of their game. And he did it, and it was literally like watching magic. But of course, what was alarming is that everything became magic in that process. Do you know what I mean? The magical thinking became totality. And that meant that he had to have corresponding recovery. So he would exist in that world and it would be total, and he would create all this amazing music. But then he basically had to go to bed for 6 weeks, And I think the Weta thing was one where he never got recovery for a while. That's why Weta, I think, ultimately broke up, because he was out there, he was doing everything, but he could not recover. And I think when he left Weta, he left music, and he left music for years to recover from that. To recover from creating such a great album, to recover from how comprehensively he adopted the kind of the idea of being a rock star and the charisma and everything like that. I mean, everyone knows, you meet Aaron, he's one of the most charismatic people but he actually needed private time and time to kind of work himself out, in contrast to that. So, and I think at times he wasn't able to find that. So it meant that he would tear down the things that were pushing him towards those things and get that recovery, and that became a swing in his life, that kind of maximum up, maximum down, and not being able to sit in the middle too long. That was, Aaron's dynamic. And when he's up, everyone's his mate, and everyone's clamoring for him, and he gets all that attention, and he gets everyone onto it, and so and deservedly so. But yeah, when he would escape from it, it would be a very small group of people really who would surround him in those moments. And I feel lucky, particularly perhaps in the last decade, to have been with him through both those periods, as a friend, you know what I mean, and working with him. I worked with him on Kyra and I Fight as well. But to be his friend and still be in touch with him during all of that.
Can you think of, off the top of your head, I guess, some of your favorite times with Aaron, whether if it was at a show or even in the studio?
Well, yeah, the studio stuff was great. We lived together for a while. That was fantastic. He was endlessly hilarious. The studio stuff was a special moment. It was a body of work. We all worked on together and we got something really special out of it. And one of the things, obviously, that I did was I actually engineered a kind of a situation to get our management team over, or to take notice of Weta and to take notice of him, and that's how they got signed. For Geographica, they got signed to, like an obscene amount of money these days. I think they spent something like $250K on making that album, and that signing was a real priority for Warner. Both in Australia and New Zealand at the time. It was like totally the dream. But yeah, look, I mean, in terms of good times, I can think of things like when my wife and I took my first daughter over to meet him, and he was just delightful. We've still got photos of that, and how beautiful he was then. He was just a friend who would show up and at various points, and you'd just always have that connection. You know what I mean? You'd always have that brotherly connection and that regard for each other and that love and that beautiful laugh he had and his ability to crack, the greatest jokes or make the greatest observations that were just so kind of insightful and beautiful and funny. And, we would always find that connection. I mean, the funny thing is that before he died, the last conversation we ever had, which was really a text conversation while he's doing one of these kind of Facebook Live guitar lessons, it was a text conversation, and it's up there still, and he's talking to me as I'm typing to him. The last contact we ever had is there for prosperity. posterity. Sorry, you know what I mean? It's like, it's really touching to reflect on it and kind of go, we always were able to connect like that. And so many occasions, so much time for him, so much, you know, so much love.
Him and the boys actually too, they talked about how you and Johnny and in those formative years introduced them to all of this New Zealand music, Bolter Space and things like that, that they just hadn't, they were talking about, oh, we're from 99 College, we knew Michael Jackson and the AC/DC Back in Black. And they really appreciate you guys opening up those musical doors. They really talked at length about it. So it's like you were like their big brothers.
Well, no, and it was a brotherhood, and that's ultimately what made it so positive. You know what I mean? Yeah, but like I said, he gave back too. You know what I mean? Like he showed me stuff too. You know, it was like, and he showed all of us stuff. And when I say stuff, you know, it was his playing, it was his personality. But no, it was great to kind of like, you know, show them the artists that were available, you know, around the corner that had inspired us. And I think he took some of that for Weta, but I could hear it continually. You know, he did a performance at the APRA Music Awards or APRA Awards maybe 2 years ago, I think it was, and he's singing and playing, and you know, I hear that Bolter Space influence mixed up with all these other ones. I could still hear what he borrowed. You know, it's subtle, but you know, if you know the code, you know. And yeah, he took that with him, and that's what his part of his genius was that he crossed and straddled so many different spheres as a human being, but as an artist, and he constantly had a voice between all of them. That's actually a very unique thing to do. You always know it's his voice. You could always pick out his guitar playing. It had a uniqueness to it, and you know, what he took from one world would always be present in another. Do you know what I mean? Even if it was subtle or a shade, it was always there. And that's what makes him so special, you know, as a musician, unique. But, you know, Aaron was just a beautiful guy, you know. And, I mean, look, he was difficult too, you know. I mean, obviously, he had his difficult moments. But it was like I could always understand them and I could always respect them. And I knew why. And I knew that it was not intention. It was things he had to deal with that were difficult. And I always knew that. So there was an ability to have that respect and love for him all the time. And when he was, you know, really there, he's one of the greatest people I've ever met.
He's an amazing guy. And, you know, you can only, you can figure out how people were based on the people that remember them. And everyone that I've talked to about Aaron, and I only talked to him a few times, but yeah, it all rings true. Everything you guys say is bang on. He's just this amazing artist.
Yeah.
He had the something special. He had the juju.
Yep. That's it. You know, yeah, I mean, and that was what he had. I mean, I think that was actually a friend of ours, Dave Berry, who saw him play and kind of coined it, saying he had, you know, because Dave was a big kind of jazz and blues fan as well. And he kind of said, oh, you've got, you know, the juju, you know, you've got the thing. And that's where the song Got the Jew came from. And it was about that feeling. And, you know, I've noticed it's a funny thing, that particular feeling or that understanding of what that is, that kind of, which is really an immersive quality or emotional connection that has no filter on it. You recognize it, and you recognize it when you know it yourself, and you recognize it in others, and it tends to transcend any idea of what corner you're from, what genre you're from, what country you're from, what your allegiances are. You know it when you see it, and it is actually the one factor that is common amongst all musicians who are fantastic. Absolutely there. And the interesting thing about it is that you can pick it out. You may have an impression of an artist, and when you see them, you know, for real, live or something like that, either they have it or they don't. And sometimes an artist that you may have, you know, a negative impression of based on the marketing or the songs that they put out, and you witness them and you go, oh my God, I have nothing but respect for you because you are actually connected. You know, you're actually channeling and you're really there. And then other times you get an artist and it's all puffed up, and then you see them and they have no connection. There's nothing there, you know. And it's interesting how many artists, you know, really have that thing. I've seen some artists who you wouldn't expect just dripping in it, you know, and it's an important quality. But Aaron had it as much as anyone I have seen has had it.
I tell you what, who's Tookie's got it as well. You can see that he's got
Of
that.
course he has.
He's got that. You see him playing bass now, and he plays with feeling. You can just see it dripping out of him.
Well, it's as if the body becomes the instrument. That's really what it is. That it's a language. It's another expression, and they're living the music. That's really what it is. That they're in totality with it. There's no consciousness going on. There's no pre-thought. It's an absolute connection between who they are and what they're playing.
Well, I know you guys have got it too, because otherwise I wouldn't be still listening to you guys after all this.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, and it's not, I really appreciate that. But and that's something I think, you recognize within a band that's that focus, and you know what it is, and you know where to get it, and that you know what distracts you from it, you know what I mean, or takes you away from it. So you're mindful, particularly as you get older, of having boundaries to ensure that you actually pull that out of each other. Because when you get it, you know that people just feel it. They don't. There's no filter. There's no explanation required. You can just hit it, and it's always about those shows, or the performance is about. We know when we've kind of got it in tune, and if it's being thrown out into the crowd, or you can hear it come off what you're recording, if it flies out of the speakers, you know what it is. And yeah, it's an important, but it's a skill. And to be able to do that with 3 other people is actually, man, that's actually absolutely unique and special to be able to do that. Find that collective, transformation of a kind. Really, it's yeah, you can't teach it really. You kind of got to have it.
Tell you what's a little bit of a weird sort of situational thing is that. So I just celebrated 10 years from working here just the other day. And it was a year after I started, we had the Rock 21st.
Yeah.
Which was at a bar in town. And we had Shihad play.
I remember that.
And we had Karo Knife Fight.
I remember that.
Aaron.
Yeah.
And I remember bailing Aaron up, not really knowing the backstory of anything. I was fresh as, and I just remember going, bro, I love Weta so much. you guys should totally, and I always remember he was so polite and nice about it, and he just said, "Oh, that was many years ago," and he's like, "Oh, it's just a little bit of a sore spot." And these later years, he had come full circle once again. He was actually doing those tutorials on Facebook, playing Weta songs, and he was, I guess, on the cusp of actually coming back around to it, because I know because I told him, we did the interview, and I told him so many people love Weta and what it means, and I think it's hard for people who aren't in the band or who didn't write the songs, who love the songs, to get, if maybe that whole experience was real tough. And that's kind of what I got from talking to the guys and talking to Aaron, is that for us as the consumer, we love it. Great album. All the songs are great. But for him, there was a lot of shit that went with that we just don't understand as the consumer. And I think that's
completely correct. Completely correct. And look, I mean, I have a belief, and I don't know if it's one that's, I'd say it's widely celebrated or even really widely expressed, but it's a pretty strong belief. But I would say this, that there are many people who need to play music for their own health, right? That they need to get it out, they need to express it. And some of those people are extremely talented. But there's a lot of people who shouldn't attempt being in the music industry, right? It's a very big distinction. Being a musician, playing music, is its own reward. It's its own thing. The music industry is a different game. It involves playing music, but it will ruin certain types of people. It will absolutely lay them out. And I think, and ultimately, I'll put it like this: people who are sensitive, and lots of great artists are, but people who are sensitive don't do well in the music industry, but they do very well at creating art.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we've put a lot of expectation on people who are genuinely delicate and genuinely sensitive to try and conform to the pressures and strains of what the music industry will do. And it's not healthy, and it's not actually sustainable, and it fucks lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's, you know, and the music industry, I mean, you know, in many ways, you know, I've got a home in the music industry, and many aspects I love in the music industry, because I suppose I meet so many people who are of a makeup that I relate to. But that doesn't mean that the music industry's a positive place, you know, and in particular for artists and those who are sensitive, it's a really tough proposition to make any kind of headway or sustain it. It's not a good time.
Yeah, like you're bang on, especially talking about creative people, and then you add a business environment with a whole lot of sharks and a whole lot of other things going on, and it's
Well,
they
yeah,
are two separate worlds, right?
totally. Well, I mean,
And the same thing.
well, let me put it like this: if someone is deeply musical and they're deeply talented, music is a thing that they need to do, right? As soon as you wrap a business about it, it stops becoming something that you need to do for yourself. It's something you have to do under obligation. And some people, not all, but some people who are of that makeup, find it hard to express themselves in any other way apart from playing music. So when you put a business around it and all the attendant normal pressures, they're the normal expectations of a business, right? But when you put that around someone's talent that they actually use to recover from the stresses of the world, or they use that to express the problems they have, and you say, now that's deliverable, you have to do it, you're actually giving them nowhere to hide. You know, you're giving them nowhere to process, nowhere to actually figure life out. And it bends them and breaks them. Now, some people can work out how to sustain that. Some people have teams around them, or families around them, or managers and support networks around them that can help them sustain that. And, you know, that's also something, you know, I'm lucky within Shihad that's actually been the case. Not always perfectly, but it's been the case, right? But there are people who are massively talented who shouldn't jump into the music industry, because it'll bend them to breaking point.
So your advice to those people is just stay playing. Don't worry about the.
My thing is that you've got to do music for the first love, right? It's got to be its own reward. And I know that, you know, it's the thing. Music is its own reward, and that should be the highest thing you want out of it. If you manage to kind of get, you know, if you think that getting attention and profile, and that's the other thing, is that a lot of people who gravitate towards getting attention and profile, they're working other shit out. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily about being a great musician. It's about, you know, receiving love from a large amount of people, because possibly it's been lacking somewhere else in your experience in life, right? So you get a lot of people who are working out their demons by engaging in the music industry, right? And then they've got, you know, talent on top. Now, I'm not actually saying that that's necessarily Aaron. I'm just saying it's a general rule. It's a cocktail for some really problematic shit to go on.
I think you've been doing a good job. I've seen you, especially with mental health in Australia, and for artists, I've seen you over the years doing different kind of workshops and speaking. And it would seem that, you know, this is a prime example of you trying to fix the things that you have seen happen in front of you.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I would say Aaron's the first example. Aaron's the first person who I thought was in trouble in some way like that, and that did that. And I went to his first psych appointment with him as a support person. And yeah, I suppose I'd like to see a world where someone like Aaron has an easier time, and it's not so hard, you know. And hopefully we can get that, you know. That'd be good.
Well, Tom, I appreciate the chat, man. I feel like I don't want to.
It's all right. No, it's fine, man. I'm all good. We can continue. It's not a problem. Just had a moment. Of course, I have a moment.
No, but it's a very real thing. You know, obviously people now are more honest than ever, and the whole psyche of toughing it out, it's obviously been watered back to a bit of more of a reality thing now, where people are a little bit more open to, obviously, that, you know, there's a lot of people out there who struggle with all sorts of things. But yeah, the music industry, definitely that place where I think creatives in general, right? Anyone who has any sort of artistic flair can often have other stuff going on, and that's why they have that outlet, is to
Yeah.
throw it all at it, right?
Yeah, of course. You know, yeah, we just got to try and make a better place for them. And Geographica stands as a monument to what's possible creatively. I know how it was done. I saw how quickly it came together. It was lightning in a bottle. It really was. It's a fucking stunning piece of work.
Very much a timeless album, and also too, talking to Aaron, like the lyrical content of that album, you don't have to read between the lines. A lot of the songs are very much, if you just if you read the lyrics, they tell
Yep.
the story of Aaron and how he was feeling and all sorts of issues that were running through his mind at the time, but
Totally.
still channeling them into just amazing tunes.
Yeah. Oh no, exactly. It's not just the message. It's the it's the entertainment you get with it. You know what I mean? And that kind of, that album is a journey. It's so beautiful, and his voice was so good because he was able to do this thing, and it was, I mean, he talked about, and I love that what he said before, but he talked about that determination, how he became a singer. But he did become a singer. He really did. But part of his voice was also, I could always hear karakia, and the kind of inflections that he'd have, from his upbringing, and his family, and his, and his background. And it was a wonderful touch when he'd used that, and you'd hear it in little places. There's songs on the album, you can hear that aspect to his voice, completely unique. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's he's 1 in 10 billion.
A great soundscape with that album too, because he talked at length about how he spent time with the producer Steve James, and they created this extra layer which was somewhere between the sort of Brit rock that was coming out and somewhere between America, and they just created all these extra textures. And one of the reasons they said that was possible is because Tookie belted out his bass line so quickly that there was all this extra time in the studio, and so Aaron just went in and like did what he did, just layer after layer, and put in all the bells and whistles in between.
Yeah. And the look, I'll put it like this. One of the great things that you can have happen with a producer, and that Aaron managed to do with Steve, and I think it's such a credit to Steve, but they basically kind of had what you'd call a love affair. You know what I mean? And we're not talking one that's physical, but it was creative love affair. And I could see Aaron in the throes of that, and there was such good partnership together. But that's also what made that album, right? This was this creative kind of dynamic across the whole recording of it, and it was like, it was so great to see them, because how they'd work, and they'd call each other. Steve would be like, "Oh darling, Aaron, oh darling," it would be the whole thing, and he'd play right up to that. You know what I mean? I'll tell you a story about him in a minute, about his irreverence, because I had one of my favorite nights out, and I just remembered did anyone ever tell you about I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, no, his relationship with Steve James was really powerful, and it really colored the whole album. So yeah, and Tookie's talent, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, everyone had beautiful chemistry in that band. They didn't always agree, but they had chemistry. And so sometimes what you see as someone's faults actually allows space for someone else to do something that they really need to do within a unit, or a kind of that kind of chemistry. And they really did have a chemistry. And sometimes Clinton and Aaron were quite opposite characters, but Aaron kind of needed someone like Clinton. You know what I mean? And to help make that move. And it was actually Clinton who could deal with the industry far more than Aaron could. You know what I mean? And Tookie just had that kind of like, I'm taking care of my corner, and I'm just so good at it, and I'm going to own it, and I'm just going to deal with it. And he exactly had that. And so he allowed his brother to take up all the rest of the real estate. You know what I mean? And which Aaron did. And so his relationship with Steve James really helped that process along. But let's not forget how much those other members were critical to all that happening as well. You know, they're all amazingly talented, amazing characters in their own way, and that chemistry within Weta was so fun to be hanging around with them. But you could see it in, you know, you could see that chemistry brought to light by Steve James as a producer. He did the most fantastic job and had a slant for them, that kind of Anglo-shaped, somewhat American-produced album. He brought that to the table, and it suited them to the ground. When I've worked with them, I was more of an American-style producer, and I tend to hear things like that. So I have a more American sensibility in how I produce music or mix music or any of that kind of stuff. But Steve brought the British thing, and he gave them that, and that really was a masterstroke for that album. It really was.
They said he worked the 9 to 5 and he loved his cups of tea.
Yeah. Worked the 9 to 5, loved the cups of tea, you know, and all that kind of thing. But, you know, the other thing about Aaron is that, and, you know, there were all these stories about, you know, the kind of time that Aaron, you know, kind of went out with Rihanna and got a tattoo and everything like that. Well, Aaron always had the most wonderful irreverence around celebrity, and he could just cut it in any room, and he would never waver from being himself. And I remember going out. We had a night drinking, and it was I think it was John and I can't remember if Carl was there, but I think it was John and I certainly, and it was Aaron and Nick from Kyra Knife Fight, and we went out with Josh Homme because they were all touring with Crooked Vultures, and we went to the Crooked Vultures show, and then we went out and, you know, kind of like hung out, and Josh wanted to go somewhere to drink, so we found a good bar in Wellington, got hooked up and everything like that, and our agent from the UK was in town with them, and so we went out with them and went on a big drinking bender. But I remember Josh was kind of like, you know, kind of hassling Aaron, and Aaron's response, I can't remember quite what Josh was saying. It was just like, you know, what's your deal, man? What's going on with you? And gave him some shit. And Aaron just turned around and went, yeah, whatever, yeah, whatever, Gingercock. And it was like, it's like, Hom just was like, didn't know what to do. And the whole table fell apart, you know what I mean? And Aaron just sat there smoking, going, you know, what of it? Brilliant.
Oh man, I can picture that too. I
just
know.
It's like a movie that plays in my head. It's like one of the greatest moments.
Yeah, he could definitely cut it with the best of them, right?
Oh man,
wherever,
just
whenever.
Always, yeah, always.
Oh, dude. I don't know if that's a better way to end it than that story, man. Whatever, King of Cock.
Possibly was sweet as King of Cock. And he landed the K on the cock, like cock, you know. Yeah.
Oh man, what a guy, what a legend, what a just absolute artist.
Yeah, absolute. Brilliant album, and testament to him.
The Rock.